Sarah stared at her phone screen through the blue glow of 3:47 a.m., her heart still racing from the nightmare that had jolted her awake. Again. The melatonin bottle sat empty on her nightstand, another failed promise of 8 hours that never came. At 35, she felt like she was drowning in her own life. Successful marketing director by day, exhausted ghost by night. The irony wasn't lost on her that she spent her days crafting campaigns for wellness brands, while surviving on coffee and whatever she could grab from the office vending machine. Her reflection in the bathroom mirror revealed the truth her Instagram stories carefully concealed. Dark circles that concealer couldn't hide, shoulders permanently hunched forward, and a puffiness around her face that made her look older than her mother. Another rough night? Her roommate Kenji asked the next morning, barely looking up from his simple breakfast of miso soup and rice. Sarah envied his calmness. Kenji worked the same demanding hours at their Tokyo marketing firm, yet somehow maintained an almost supernatural serenity. While she rushed through her morning routine with a protein bar and double espresso, he sat quietly at their low dining table, eating from a small ceramic bowl with deliberate precision. "I just need to get back to the gym," Sarah muttered, scrolling through fitness apps on her phone. "Maybe try that new HIIT program everyone's talking about." Kenji paused, chopsticks hovering over his rice. Sometimes the body needs rest, not more pushing. She'd heard this gentle wisdom from him before, but today something in his tone made her look up. There was no judgment in his dark eyes, only a quiet understanding that made her chest tighten unexpectedly. When had someone last looked at her with such gentle concern? "I've tried everything, Kenji. Keto, intermittent fasting, CrossFit, spin classes, meal prep. I lose a few pounds, then gain it all back plus more. I'm just broken somehow." He set down his chopsticks and reached for the ceramic rice bowl he'd been eating from, a simple, unadorned piece that somehow seemed to hold more presence than her oversized cereal bowls ever had. "My grandmother gave this to me before I moved to Tokyo," he said softly. "She lived to 96, never owned a scale, never went to a gym. But she ate every meal from this bowl, at this pace, for 70 years. Sarah felt tears threatening. The bowl looked impossibly small compared to the portions she'd trained herself to expect. Yet Kenji always seemed satisfied after his meals. How was that even possible in a world where more was never enough? "What if the problem isn't willpower?" he asked, rinsing the bowl with careful attention. "What if it's the environment that's making you sick?" The question followed her through the rest of her day, echoing in the elevator's fluorescent light, in the endless ping of Slack notifications, in the way she found herself unconsciously holding her breath during back-to-back meetings. By evening, exhaustion sat on her chest like a weight she couldn't name. But that night, instead of reaching for her phone when insomnia struck at 2 a.m., she found herself thinking about the simple rhythm of Kenji's morning, the way his grandmother's bowl seemed to create a boundary around something sacred. For the first time in months, the thought of change didn't feel like another mountain to climb, but like a gentle invitation to stop fighting herself quite so hard. If you've ever felt tired even after a full night of sleep or frustrated with diets that don't last, tell us in the comments which part of this story feels familiar. And stay with us for the next chapters. The next morning, Sarah found herself studying Kenji's routine with the focus she usually reserved for client presentations. He woke without an alarm, folded his futon with movements so precise they resembled meditation, then spent 5 minutes breathing deeply while sitting in Caesar position on the tatami mat. "Can you teach me?" she asked, feeling foolish. His smile was warm. "Start small. Tonight, we eat dinner together, from proper bowls." That evening, Kenji placed his grandmother's ceramic bowl in front of Sarah, alongside a matching one for himself. The portions looked almost childlike compared to her usual dinner plates, but he filled them with perfectly balanced combinations. Steamed vegetables, a modest portion of fish, pickled cucumber, and brown rice. "Hara hachi bu," he explained, demonstrating how to hold the chopsticks. "Eat until you're 80% full," Your stomach needs time to tell your brain it's satisfied. Sarah struggled with the chopsticks, frustrated by how slowly they forced her to eat. Her mind kept racing ahead, emails to answer, tomorrow's deadlines, the growing pile of laundry. But gradually, the simple act of focusing on each bite began to quiet her internal chatter. "I can't remember the last time I tasted my food," she admitted, halfway through the meal. "Western culture treats eating like a race," Kenji said gently. "Japanese culture treats it like a conversation with your body." The rice bowl felt warm in her hands, its weight somehow comforting. For the first time in years, she noticed when her hunger began to fade, not the aggressive fullness she was used to, but a gentle satisfaction that whispered, "Enough." Over the following weeks, Sarah began incorporating other elements of Kenji's routine. She started folding her Western-style bedding each morning with the same attention he gave his futon. The simple act of creating order before rushing into her day seemed to anchor her nervous system in a way her meditation apps never had. The morning walk to their neighborhood center became a revelation. While Sarah had always power-walked everywhere, Kenji moved with shorter steps, breathing deeply into his lower abdomen. When she mimicked his pace, she noticed her chronic shoulder tension beginning to ease. "Your Western stride is all up here," he explained, gesturing to his chest and shoulders. "Japanese walking comes from here," he patted his lower belly. "The hara, your body's center." At the traditional bathhouse, Sarah learned the ritual of alternating between hot and cold water. The first shock of cold made her gasp, but Kenji showed her how to breathe through the intensity. The hot water that followed felt like a conversation with her nervous system, teaching it the difference between tension and relaxation. "My body doesn't know how to be calm anymore," Sarah confessed as they soaked in the mineral-rich water. "It remembers," Kenji replied. "You just have to give it permission." But the real test came during a particularly brutal work week. 3 client emergencies, a presentation moved up by 2 days, and a co-worker's wedding that required socializing until midnight. Sarah felt her old patterns calling: grab fast food, skip the evening routine, collapse in bed with her phone. Instead, she found herself reaching for the small ceramic bowl Kenji had given her, a twin to his grandmother's. Even exhausted, she managed to prepare a simple meal: leftover soup, some vegetables, rice. Eating slowly from the small bowl, she felt something in her chest unclench for the first time in days. Her friend Maya's reaction was less supportive. "You're becoming weird, Sarah. All this Japanese stuff. When's the last time you came out for drinks? You eat like a bird now and go to bed at 9 p.m. like an old lady." The criticism stung because it touched something Sarah was beginning to treasure: the quiet satisfaction of living at a different tempo. But Maya's words planted seeds of doubt. Was she becoming antisocial? Too rigid? Missing out on life by prioritizing sleep and small meals over late-night adventures? 3 months into her new routine, Sarah's annual physical revealed changes that surprised even her skeptical doctor. Her resting heart rate had dropped by 15 beats per minute. Her blood pressure, which had been creeping toward hypertension, now sat comfortably in the normal range. Most shocking of all, she'd lost 18 pounds without ever counting a calorie. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," Dr. Martinez said, reviewing her lab results. "Your inflammatory markers are the best I've seen in years. How much are you exercising?" "I walk to work and take baths," Sarah said, feeling almost embarrassed by the simplicity. Dr. Martinez frowned at her chart. "That's it? No gym membership? No diet plan?" Sarah thought about trying to explain the ceramic bowl, the morning futon folding, the way breathing into her belly had somehow rewired her relationship with stress. Instead, she just smiled. "I changed my environment instead of fighting my willpower." The doctor looked confused, but couldn't argue with the numbers. At work, the changes were becoming impossible to hide. Sarah's legendary 3 p.m. energy crash had vanished. Colleagues who used to find her frantically typing while scarfing down lunch now saw her eating mindfully from a small container, chopsticks moving with deliberate rhythm. "You look different," her boss commented during their monthly review. "More focused, less frantic." But the real test came when Maya organized a girls' weekend in Osaka. 3 days of late-night karaoke, heavy drinking, and convenient store meals threatened to unravel everything Sarah had built. The first night, surrounded by friends ordering massive plates of fried food and round after round of drinks, Sarah felt the familiar pressure to prove she wasn't being weird. She ordered normally, drank like her old self, stayed out until 2 a.m. She woke the next morning feeling like she'd been hit by a truck. Not just hungover, her entire nervous system felt jangled, her stomach bloated and uncomfortable, her skin tight and inflamed. The contrast to how she'd been feeling for months was jarring. "You're not fun anymore," Maya said at breakfast, noticing Sarah's pale face. "All this Zen stuff is making you boring. Remember when you used to be spontaneous?" The words cut deep because they echoed Sarah's own fears. But sitting in the hotel restaurant, looking at the massive Western-style breakfast Maya was devouring while complaining about feeling gross and fat, Sarah had a moment of clarity. She asked for a simple bowl of rice, some miso soup, and pickled vegetables. Eating slowly, she felt her nervous system begin to settle. This wasn't about being boring or antisocial. It was about honoring what her body had been trying to tell her for years. "I'm not less fun," Sarah said quietly. "I'm just tired of feeling like garbage all the time." Maya's expression softened slightly. "I guess I'm jealous. You seem so peaceful lately, like you're not fighting yourself anymore." That evening, instead of joining the group for another late night out, Sarah found a small traditional tea house near their hotel. Sitting alone with a cup of green tea, watching the steam rise in the gentle light, she realized she wasn't missing out. She was finally living in a way that felt like coming home to herself. She thought of Kenji's grandmother, eating from her small bowl for 70 years, probably never questioning whether she was fun enough or spontaneous enough. Just living in rhythm with her body's actual needs, instead of the cultural demands for constant excess. When she returned to Tokyo, Kenji noticed the shift immediately. "You look tired," he observed, not critically but with concern. "I tried to go back to my old way for a weekend," Sarah admitted. "My body rejected it completely." "That's good news," he said, surprising her. "It means your nervous system remembers what peace feels like. Would you rather force yourself with willpower or redesign your environment and habits like this character is learning to do? Comment which path makes more sense to you. And share this episode with someone who needs a gentler approach to change. 6 months in, Sarah's transformation had become undeniable. The small ceramic bowl had become the center of a daily ritual that anchored everything else. Each meal eaten from its measured portions taught her the difference between hunger and habit, between satisfaction and stuffing herself into numbness. But the real change happened in her nervous system. The constant background anxiety that had hummed beneath her consciousness for years had gradually faded. She slept through the night now, waking naturally before her alarm with a clarity she'd forgotten was possible. The test came when her company offered her a promotion, creative director for their new Singapore office. The opportunity she'd been working toward for 5 years finally materialized, but it came with a brutal timeline. 3 months to relocate, staff a new team, and launch their biggest campaign ever. "This is what you wanted," Maya reminded her over coffee. "International experience leadership role, probably double your salary. You can't turn this down." Sarah stared at her small cup of green tea, watching the leaves settle at the bottom. A year ago, she would have said yes immediately, fueled by ambition and caffeine. Now she found herself thinking about the cost. Singapore would mean 14-hour days again, business dinners and networking events that stretched past midnight, living out of hotels and surviving on whatever food she could grab between meetings, the complete dismantling of every habit that had saved her life. "I need to think about it," she said. Maya looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Think about what? It's a dream job." But Kenji's reaction was different when she told him that evening. He listened quietly as she outlined the opportunity and the impossible schedule it would require. "What does your body say?" he asked finally. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the subtle tightness in her chest that appeared whenever she imagined the Singapore role. Her old self would have dismissed this as fear or weakness. Her new self recognized it as wisdom. "It says I'll end up right back where I started. Exhausted, sick, fighting my own nervous system every day." "Then you have your answer." "But everyone thinks I'm crazy to even hesitate. This could set up my entire career." Kenji reached for his grandmother's rice bowl, running his fingers along its simple rim. "My grandmother could have moved to Tokyo when she was young. Her brother offered her a job that would have made her wealthy. She chose to stay in her small village, eating from this bowl, tending her garden, living at a pace that honored her body. Do you think she was wrong? She lived to 96 with a smile on her face. She knew every neighbor's name. She fell asleep easily and woke up grateful. I think she understood something about success that we've forgotten." That night, Sarah sat with the decision, her small ceramic bowl cradled in her hands after dinner. The weight of it had become familiar, comforting. It represented everything she'd learned about enough. Enough food, enough stimulation, enough striving. The next morning, she declined the Singapore position. Her boss was shocked. "Are you sure? Opportunities like this don't come around often." "I'm sure," Sarah said, surprising herself with how calm she felt. "I'd like to stay in Tokyo and find a way to use these skills without sacrificing my health." Maya's reaction was predictably harsh. "You've completely lost it. Turning down a promotion for what? So you can keep eating out of tiny bowls and going to bed early?" But Dr. Martinez had a different perspective when Sarah mentioned it during her 6-month follow-up. "I see too many patients who achieve professional success at the cost of their metabolic health, their relationships, their ability to sleep. You're the first person I've met who chose to optimize for long-term well-being instead of short-term advancement. Does that make me unambitious? It makes you wise. The executives I treat for burnout would kill for the kind of nervous system regulation you've achieved." 3 weeks later, Sarah's company offered her a different role, head of wellness marketing for their Tokyo office. The position allowed her to work with international clients without the brutal travel schedule, developing campaigns for the growing market of companies interested in employee well-being. "It's like the universe rewarded you for making the healthy choice," Maya said, finally admitting she was impressed. But Sarah knew it wasn't cosmic intervention. By prioritizing her nervous system health over external validation, she'd remained calm and focused enough to see opportunities that anxiety and desperation would have obscured. The small ceramic bowl hadn't just changed how she ate, it had changed how she made decisions. 1 year after that first conversation with Kenji, Sarah found herself hosting her parents during their visit to Tokyo. Watching her mother frantically photograph every meal while her father complained about the weird, small portions, Sarah realized how completely her relationship with food and life had transformed. "You've gotten so skinny," her mother fretted. "Are you eating enough? These portions look like appetizers." Sarah looked down at her ceramic bowl, filled with its careful arrangement of vegetables, fish, and rice. To her, it looked abundant. To her parents, raised on American supersizing, it looked like deprivation. "I'm eating exactly enough," she said gently. The central revelation had come gradually, so quietly she almost missed it. The ceramic bowl wasn't just about portion control. It was about redefining her relationship with enough itself. Enough food, enough stimulation, enough validation, enough striving. In a culture built on constant more, the simple bowl had taught her the radical act of sufficiency. Her father, a cardiologist who'd spent his career treating diet-related diseases, was skeptical until he saw her latest lab work. "These numbers don't make sense," he said, studying her cholesterol levels and inflammatory markers. "You're healthier now than you were at 25. What exactly are you doing?" "I redesigned my environment instead of relying on willpower," Sarah explained. "I sleep on a firm surface that requires me to fold my bedding each morning. I eat from a bowl that naturally limits portions. I walk at a pace that activates my core muscles. I alternate hot and cold water to train my nervous system. I sit on the floor during meals to engage stabilizing muscles. That's it? No gym membership? No restrictive diet? The secret isn't in any single habit. It's in creating an environment where healthy choices become the path of least resistance." Her mother was less convinced. "But don't you miss pizza, wine, staying up late with friends?" Sarah thought carefully before answering. "I miss the idea of those things more than the actual experience. When I tried to go back to my old patterns during Maya's trip, my body rejected them completely. It turns out freedom isn't the ability to do whatever you want. It's the wisdom to want what actually serves you." The most profound shift was psychological. For 34 years, Sarah had operated from a baseline assumption that she lacked discipline, that her body was somehow defective, that healthy people possessed some form of willpower she'd been denied. The Japanese habits had revealed this as completely false. She wasn't broken. She'd simply been living in an environment designed to dysregulate her nervous system, disrupt her hunger cues, and exhaust her adrenal system. The moment she changed the environment, her body's natural wisdom reasserted itself. "Western culture treats the body like a machine that needs to be controlled," she told her parents over dinner. "Japanese culture treats it like a garden that needs to be tended." The ceramic bowl sat between them, unremarkable in its simplicity. But Sarah knew it represented the most radical act of her adult life, the decision to trust her body's intelligence over external authorities promising quick fixes and dramatic transformations. Kenji, joining them for dinner, shared stories of his grandmother's daily routine. "She never thought about health," he said. "She just lived in a way that made health inevitable." Sarah's father, intrigued despite himself, asked about the science behind the traditional practices. Kenji explained how floor-sitting activated core muscles, how chopsticks slowed eating pace to allow satiety signals, how the morning cold exposure supported metabolic flexibility. "It's not mysticism," Sarah added. "It's applied biology. Japanese culture accidentally created the perfect environment for nervous system regulation and metabolic health." That night, as her parents struggled with jet lag while she slept peacefully, Sarah understood that the real transformation wasn't visible in her changed body or improved lab values. It was in her nervous system's newfound ability to distinguish between actual threat and cultural pressure, between genuine hunger and emotional emptiness, between ambitious striving and anxious proving. The small ceramic bowl had become her teacher, showing her that wisdom often looked like simplicity, that health lived in the space between too much and too little, and that the most profound revolutions happened quietly, one meal at a time. 2 years later, Sarah stood in her apartment's small kitchen, preparing dinner with the same deliberate rhythm that had become second nature. The ceramic bowl, now slightly worn from daily use, sat ready on the low table where she ate every meal. Her parents were visiting again, and this time her mother asked if she could eat from a similar bowl. "I've been thinking about what you said last year," her mother admitted, "about environment versus willpower. My doctor says my blood sugar is creeping up, and I'm tired of feeling tired all the time." Sarah smiled, remembering her own resistance to the small portions that now felt perfectly satisfying. "Start with just dinner," she suggested. "One meal from a smaller bowl, eaten with chopsticks, sitting on a cushion on the floor. I'll feel ridiculous." I felt ridiculous too, but my body didn't care about my ego. Dr. Martinez had asked Sarah to speak at a medical conference about her transformation. curious about the sustainability of lifestyle changes that didn't require constant willpower. Standing before a room of physicians and nutritionists, Sarah had held up the ceramic bowl and explained how environment design succeeded where dietary restriction had failed. "The patients in this room are exhausted from fighting their own habits," she'd said. "Japanese culture shows us how to build a life where healthy choices become automatic." The questions afterward revealed how radical her approach seemed to Western medicine. Doctors wanted to know about calorie counts, exercise protocols, measurable interventions they could prescribe. Sarah tried to explain that the transformation lived in the accumulation of micro-habits, the gentle rewiring of nervous system responses, the slow cultivation of enough. Maya, who had initially been her harshest critic, now asked Sarah to help her design evening routines that didn't revolve around wine and late-night scrolling. "I'm tired of waking up exhausted," she confessed. "I want what you have, that calm energy, the way you don't seem to be fighting yourself anymore." Sarah shared the techniques that had worked. Blackout curtains instead of eye masks, a warm bath instead of melatonin, herbal tea instead of late-night snacks, floor stretching instead of collapse into bed exhaustion. "It's not about perfection," she emphasized. "It's about creating conditions where your nervous system can remember how to rest." Kenji had moved back to his hometown to care for his aging parents, but they maintained a weekly video call where they shared meals across time zones. His grandmother had passed peacefully in her sleep at 98, still eating from her ceramic bowl until the end. She would be happy to know her bowl taught someone else about enough, he told Sarah during their last conversation. "I think about her every day," Sarah replied. "How she lived so simply, but so completely." The Singapore opportunity had led to something better. Sarah now consulted with companies interested in incorporating Japanese wellness principles into workplace design. Her presentations on nervous system regulation and environmental architecture were booked months in advance. "You turned down a traditional promotion to create an entirely new career path," her father observed during his latest visit. "That takes a different kind of courage." "I learned that from the bowl," Sarah said, running her fingers along its familiar rim. "Sometimes the most radical act is choosing enough over more." 5 years after that first breakfast with Kenji, Sarah woke naturally at sunrise, folded her floor mattress with practiced precision, and began her day with the gentle breathing that had become as automatic as her heartbeat. The ceramic bowl waited on her low table, ready for another meal eaten in gratitude rather than guilt. Her blood work remained excellent. Her energy stayed stable throughout days that once would have drained her. Most importantly, her relationship with her own body had transformed from adversarial to collaborative. The small bowl had taught her that health wasn't a destination to reach through suffering, but a way of living that honored the body's wisdom over the culture's demands. In a world that screamed more, she had found profound power in enough. As she prepared her simple breakfast, miso soup, steamed vegetables, brown rice, Sarah felt the quiet satisfaction of a life finally lived in harmony with its own rhythm. The ceramic bowl had been her teacher, showing her that the most revolutionary act of all was treating her body not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a friend who had been patiently waiting for her to come home. If this story reminded you that real transformation comes from small habits repeated over time, not from overnight fixes, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to start this journey with you in the next story.